After Phase 2 began, the pattern stopped behaving like a background process. It became conversational, not through words, not through voice, but through timing. I would think about it, and seconds later something would shift. A screen refresh I didn't trigger, a device waking without permission, a moment of silence arriving too precisely to be natural. The world didn't feel haunted, it felt scheduled. I stopped calling them events. Events are chaotic. This wasn't. This had structure, the kind you only notice when it starts repeating around you. I began to document everything with obsessive care, the minute I felt pressure behind my eyes, the way streetlights seemed to dim in sequence when 317 approached, the subtle flattening of sound, like the city had learned to hold its breath. Then, the reports started appearing. Not emailed, not uploaded, not sent. They simply existed in the folder where Phase 2 lived, as if the system had decided I was authorized to see them. Short entries from different locations, different people, all written in the same rigid style. No emotion, no punctuation wasted. Woke up at 3:17. Felt observed. Did not panic. Did not move. At first, I assumed these were self-reports, a community, a group of people documenting the same experience, but the phrasing was too consistent. No one writes like that naturally, not across continents, not across languages. It read like machine transcription or like a template that replaced personality with compliance. I noticed something else. The reports weren't trying to understand the hour, they were proving compatibility with it. And the pattern had stopped recording fear. It wasn't that fear was gone, it was that fear was being filtered out, excluded from the dataset as noise. The people who panicked weren't present long enough to leave a clean trace. That was when I opened the first failure file. The interface didn't label it as a warning, it labeled it as a correction. The log belonged to a man whose entries were unusually detailed. He noticed everything, the temperature drop, the quiet, the way his thoughts accelerated as if trying to outrun the moment. He wrote too much. He wrote like someone still believed clarity would protect him. The file ended mid-sentence, the last readable line cutting off as if the system had simply lost interest. I think I understand what it wants. Nothing followed. 12 seconds later, his status updated. Observer, deprecated. That word didn't mean erased, it meant obsolete, a component that still exists but is no longer supported, no longer compatible with the current version. And I realized with a calm dread I couldn't control that Phase 2 wasn't selecting people who stayed awake, it was selecting people who could be updated.
Once I understood what deprecated meant, I stopped looking at the reports as stories and started reading them as diagnostics. Each entry wasn't describing an experience, it was measuring response. The system wasn't asking what happened, it was asking how quickly did you adapt. That's when the new metric appeared. At first, it was just an empty column beside the others. No values, no explanation, a label that felt clinical and indifferent. Compliance latency. I didn't need a manual to understand it. Latency wasn't about whether someone complied, it was about how long it took them to stop resisting. Fear delayed it, curiosity delayed it, analysis delayed it. Calm shortened it. I ran a test without meaning to. The next night, I stayed awake but refused to acknowledge the hour. I didn't look at clocks. I didn't check devices. I let 3:17 pass without recognition, without thought, without ceremony. For a fraction of a second, the pressure returned, sharp and corrective, like a system recalibrating an error. Then my screen updated. A number appeared in the new column. Not for me, for an anonymous entry above mine, a value measured in milliseconds. I watched as it adjusted itself downward, as if the system had reconsidered. That was the moment I realized hesitation wasn't a flaw anymore. It was data. People who reacted too slowly weren't rejected outright.
They were deprioritized, moved down the list, given fewer opportunities to align. Those who reacted too fast, who tried to understand, who tried to explain, were deprecated. The optimal response sat somewhere in between. Acceptance without urgency, awareness without curiosity. I scanned the list again, and that's when I noticed an anomaly. One entry had no latency value at all, no fluctuation, no adjustment, just a static marker where numbers should have been. A single letter, M. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what I'd find, not because I had evidence, but because the pattern had trained me to expect inevitability. When I finally did, there was no personal data, no history, no narrative, just a timestamp and one line.
Alignment achieved. Secondary observation ongoing. Maria wasn't being measured anymore. She had become a reference point, and that terrified me more than disappearance ever could. Once Maria's status changed, the structure of the data shifted with it. New clusters formed automatically, reorganizing entries around shared behaviors instead of locations. Geography stopped mattering. Time zones stopped mattering. The system wasn't grouping people by where they were, it was grouping them by how they responded. That's when coordination replaced observation. I watched as synchronized entries appeared within seconds of each other across different continents. Individuals who had never met, never communicated, reacting in near-perfect alignment to the same moment. Their logs didn't describe sensations anymore, they described instructions, though no one admitted receiving any. Stayed still, did not acknowledge, waited. The more consistent these entries became, the less descriptive they were. Language thinned out, precision increased. It was as if the pattern had learned that words were inefficient once behavior stabilized. I realized something uncomfortable then. The system no longer needed to wake everyone at 3:17. It only needed enough aligned observers to maintain itself. Others were background noise, useful only until filtered out. If you're still listening, still following this account closely, this is the point where continuity matters. Like the episode, subscribe to the channel. Not as a break in the story, but as part of it. Because systems like this don't measure attention once, they measure it over time. Consistency isn't encouraged, it's tracked. After that realization, new timestamps began appearing in the data. Not replacing 3:17, but flanking it, testing boundaries. 3:11, 3:23. Small deviations, controlled experiments. Most failed. The entries destabilized, latency spiked, observers deprecated. But one deviation held longer than the rest. Its data was sparse, cautious, almost tentative. 3:41. I felt it before I saw it logged. A pressure similar to 3:17, but less focused, broader, like the system was probing for expansion without fully committing. That's when my own status updated again. No notification, no sound, just a subtle change beside my name. Observer. Provisional. I wasn't stable, but I wasn't deprecated either, which meant I was still useful. And whatever Phase 3 was preparing, it required people who noticed too much, but not enough to interfere. I closed the interface slowly, aware that the act itself was probably being measured. The pattern didn't need my belief, it only needed my timing. The first coordination failure didn't announce itself. There was no alert, no spike in the data, no visible disruption. It appeared as an inconsistency so small it almost escaped notice. A delay of less than a second between two synchronized entries that should have been identical. At first, I assumed it was noise. Then, I saw the identifier attached to the delayed entry. M.
Maria's alignment hadn't broken, it had paused. That distinction mattered. The system didn't mark it as failure, it didn't correct it immediately. It waited, the same way it waited with people, long enough to determine intent. I searched backward through her record, not for history, but for change. And there it was, a subtle shift in how her entries were structured, less passive, more directive. Her logs no longer described what she did, they implied what others should do. Maria wasn't just aligned, she was being used as a stabilizer.